First contact. The air was getting colder as Jake folded his lifeguard chair at Lake Michigan. Most people had already left the beach, leaving only the sound of gentle waves hitting the shore. The sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful orange and purple colors. It was supposed to be just another normal evening for the 23-year-old lifeguard, but fate had other plans. As Jake was about to leave, he noticed something strange in the water. Bright blue and green lights were glowing beneath the surface, something he had never seen before in his 5 years as a lifeguard. At first, he thought it might be some kid swimming with glow sticks, but then he heard it, a splash and a cry for help that didn't sound quite human. Without thinking twice, Jake dropped his backpack and ran toward the water. His lifeguard training kicked in as he dove into the cold lake. The strange lights were about 50 feet from shore, and as he got closer, he could see a figure struggling in the water. But what he saw next made him freeze for a moment. The person had blue, shimmering skin that seemed to glow in the darkening water. Jake pushed his shock aside. Someone needed help, and that's all that mattered right now. He reached the struggling figure and saw it was a young woman, but definitely not human. Her skin wasn't just blue. It had patterns that glowed like tiny stars, and where human ears would be, she had what looked like small fins. Her eyes were large and purple, filled with fear as she fought to stay above water. "Hold on," Jake called out, switching to his rescue position. "I've got you." The alien girl tried to speak, but only strange sounds came out as she coughed up water. Jake noticed something broken floating nearby. It looked like a high-tech device with pieces falling off. He grabbed it with one hand while keeping the alien girl secure with his other arm. Swimming back to shore was harder than usual. The alien girl was lighter than a human her size would be, but her panic made it difficult to move smoothly through the water. Jake kept talking to her in a calm voice, even though he wasn't sure if she could understand him. When they finally reached the beach, Jake helped her sit on the sand. She was shivering, her blue skin now looking slightly pale. He quickly grabbed his lifeguard towel and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "Can you understand me?" The alien girl looked at him with those strange purple eyes. After a moment, she spoke in broken English. "Yes. Thank you. Save me." Her voice had a musical quality to it, like each word was part of a song. She held up the broken device. "My breathing help broke." She pointed at her neck, where Jake could now see what looked like gills. "Cannot breathe right without it." Jake sat down next to her, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm Jake," he said, pointing to himself. "What's your name?" "Zara," she replied, her voice getting stronger. "I am learning human words. Father says, no coming up here. But I wanted to see sunset." Jake's eyes widened. "There are more like you under the lake." Zara nodded, but then looked worried. "Secret, big secret. Father is leader, cannot know I come up." She touched the broken device sadly. "Now in trouble. Device tells others where I am." Just then, they heard a humming sound from the water. Zara quickly stood up, almost falling before Jake caught her arm to steady her. "Must go," she said urgently. "They come to find me." But before she could run back to the water, she turned to Jake. Reaching into a small pouch at her waist, she pulled out what looked like a crystal pendant. "Take this," she said, pressing it into his hand. "Come tomorrow. Same time. I explain more." She looked into his eyes. "Promise safe. You good human." Jake looked at the crystal in his hand. It was warm and seemed to pulse with a faint light. When he looked up again, Zara was already running into the water. Just before diving in, she turned and waved. Then she disappeared beneath the surface, leaving only a few glowing ripples that quickly faded away. Jake stood there for a long time, holding the crystal and staring at the lake. The sun had set completely now, but his mind was brighter than ever with questions. He knew his life had just changed forever, but he had no idea just how much. All he knew was that tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. He carefully put the crystal in his pocket and picked up his backpack. As he walked away from the beach, he couldn't help but smile. After all, it's not every day you save an alien princess and get invited to learn about an underwater civilization. Secret meetings. The crystal in Jake's pocket had been glowing brighter all day. As night approached, its pulsing matched his racing heartbeat. He checked his watch again, 8:45 p.m. The beach was empty, just as it had been yesterday when he saved Zara from drowning. This time, Jake came prepared. He brought a waterproof flashlight, a first aid kit, and an extra towel. What he wasn't prepared for was what happened when he reached the shoreline. The crystal suddenly floated out of his pocket, hovering in the air before shooting a beam of light across the water. Minutes later, the lake's surface began to glow. Zora emerged, but she wasn't alone. Following behind her was what looked like a small underwater vehicle, about the size of a jet ski, but shaped like a teardrop. It glowed with the same patterns as Zora's skin. "Jake," Zora called out, her English noticeably better than yesterday. "The crystal taught you our language while you carried it." Jake opened his mouth to respond and was shocked when different words came out. "How am I speaking your language?" He could hear himself speaking English, but he also heard musical tones overlapping his words. Zara smiled, her purple eyes sparkling. "Crystal technology. Very old. Very special." She patted the floating vehicle. "This is my personal transport. Want to see something amazing?" Before Jake could answer, Zara pressed her hand against the vehicle's surface. It transformed, splitting into two floating seats with what looked like a bubble shield around them. "Perfectly safe," she assured him. 2 hours of air inside. Jake hesitated for only a moment before climbing in. The seat was surprisingly comfortable, molding to his body. The bubble sealed around them. And suddenly they were moving across the lake's surface. "I shouldn't do this," Zara said, controlling the vehicle with light touches. "Father has rules. No surface contact. But you're different." She looked at him seriously. "You saved me without knowing what I was." Most would swim away in fear. They stopped in the middle of the lake. Below them, Jake could see lights twinkling like an underwater city. Zara touched another control, and their bubble filled with what sounded like music, but it was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was as if the water itself was singing. "This is our city's heartbeat," Zora explained. "Each light is a family home. We've lived here for 500 years, since our old world died. Earth's oceans gave us refuge." She showed Jake a hologram that appeared in the center of their bubble. It showed magnificent underwater structures, gardens that glowed with bioluminescent plants, and vehicles similar to theirs moving through underwater tunnels. "But our society is dying," Zora said softly. "We need new ideas, new energy." She touched the hologram, and it showed sick-looking plants and failing light systems. "That's why I started coming to the surface, to learn, to find hope." Suddenly, alarms started blaring from her control panel. "Security scan." Zora gasped. "They're checking the lake surface." She quickly pressed several controls, and their bubble descended underwater. They hid among tall lake weeds as a larger vehicle passed overhead. Jake's heart was pounding, but he wasn't afraid. Instead, he felt more alive than ever. Once the security vessel passed, Zara released a breath she'd been holding. That was close. Too close. She started to bring them back up, but Jake touched her arm. "Wait," he said, the musical language still feeling strange on his tongue. "Show me more. If your people need help, maybe our peoples can work together." Zora's expression was a mix of hope and worry. "It's forbidden, but..." She touched another control, and their bubble changed color, becoming nearly invisible. Perhaps just a quick tour of the outer gardens. What Jake saw next was beyond his wildest dreams. Underwater arches covered in glowing plants stretched into the dark water. Fish he had never seen before swam in perfect formations, seeming to dance with the current. And everywhere, there were signs of an advanced civilization living in harmony with the lake's natural environment. But their wonder was cut short by another alarm. This one was different, more urgent. Zara's face went pale. "No," she whispered. "Father's personal guard. They're coming from all directions." Jake looked around. They were surrounded by approaching lights. Zara's hands flew over the controls, but nothing happened. "They've locked our transport." Just then, the crystal around Jake's neck began to pulse with intense light. Zara stared at it in shock. "Impossible," she breathed. "The crystal of the first contact. It chose you." Before Jake could ask what she meant, the crystal's light engulfed their bubble. As the guard vehicles reached them, something extraordinary began to happen, something that would change both their worlds forever. The crystal's power was about to reveal an ancient prophecy, one that would either bring their worlds together or tear them apart completely. And Jake, a simple lifeguard from Lake Michigan, was somehow at the center of it all. The crystal's prophecy. The crystal's light created a giant bubble around Jake and Zara, pushing back the approaching guard vehicles. Inside, time seemed to slow down. Ancient symbols appeared in the water around them, glowing with intense blue-white light. "The prophecy of waters," Zara gasped, her purple eyes wide. "It's not just a children's story." The crystal floated from Jake's neck, growing larger until it was the size of a basketball. Images began playing inside it like a holographic movie. It showed Earth thousands of years ago, when Zara's people first arrived from their dying world. But what they saw next shocked them both. The crystal revealed that humans and Zara's people, the HFY, had worked together back then. They had built great underwater cities together, shared technology, and lived in peace. But a great disaster struck, a massive storm that lasted for months. The HFY went deep underwater to survive, while humans moved inland. Over time, both species forgot about each other. But why show us this now? Jake wondered aloud. The musical language of the HFY still felt strange on his tongue. Before Zara could answer, her father's voice boomed through the water. "Because history is about to repeat itself." The protective bubble around them faded. They were surrounded by 20 guard vehicles, and in the largest one sat Zora's father, King Nixon. Unlike Zora's blue skin, his was deep purple with silver patterns. The crown on his head seemed to be made of living coral that changed colors with his mood. Right now, it was a stormy gray. "Father," Zora started, but Nixon raised his hand. "The surface sensors detected it 3 days ago," he said gravely. "A storm is coming. Not just any storm, one that matches the ancient readings, one that could destroy both our peoples." The crystal projected new images, massive storm clouds gathering over the Great Lakes, unlike anything seen before. Lightning struck in impossible patterns, and the water itself seemed to boil. "That's why I've ordered the barrier project to begin," Nixon continued. "We will create an energy shield around our cities, sealing us off completely from the surface." "But father," Zora protested, "that will kill all the natural lake life. The barrier will block the natural water flow. Both our peoples need the lake to survive." Jake stepped forward, surprising the guards. "Your Majesty," he said, the crystal's translation making his words clear, "the prophecy showed us working together for a reason." "Look." The crystal was projecting again, but this time it showed something new. It revealed a network of ancient machines, hidden in caves around the lake. Human and HFY technology combined, designed to control the lake's weather patterns. "The ancient weather network," Nixon whispered. It was real. His coral crown shifted to a deep blue of wonder. "But it needs both peoples to operate it," Jake said, understanding coming to him through the crystal. "The machines need human DNA and HFY energy to function. That's why the crystal chose this moment. We need each other to survive." Suddenly, their discussion was interrupted by a massive tremor. The lake water vibrated around them, and in the distance, lightning struck the water's surface. The storm was coming early. King Nixon's crown turned a fierce red. We don't have time to verify this. The barrier project begins in 6 hours. If you believe the prophecy, prove it before then. He turned to the guards. Let them try. If they fail, we seal ourselves away forever. As the guard vehicles dispersed, Jake and Zara looked at each other. They had 6 hours to find ancient machines, figure out how they worked, and save both their peoples. The crystal glowed between them, showing a map with 4 locations marked around Lake Michigan. We'll need help, Zara said, bringing up a communication screen on their vehicle. I know some others who question the barrier plan. Young Aquari who believe in connecting with the surface world again. Jake pulled out his phone. I have some friends too. Scientists and engineers who will believe me when they see your technology. The crystal pulsed once more, showing them what would happen if they failed. The storm would devastate the surface, and the barrier would destroy the lake's ecosystem. Both societies would suffer immensely. 4 locations, Jake said, looking at the map. 4 pieces of ancient technology. 4 hours to find them, Zara added. 1 hour to connect them. And 1 hour to activate everything before the barrier starts. Jake finished. They looked at the gathering storm clouds above. Lightning flashed in unnatural patterns, and the water around them felt charged with energy. Their time had begun. Zora programmed their vehicle for the first location. The closest site is in an underwater cave near Milwaukee, she said. My friends will meet us there. My colleagues will meet us at the surface, Jake replied, sending quick messages. Let's just hope the storm holds off long enough. As they sped through the dark water, the crystal continued to glow, its light a beacon of hope in the growing darkness. Behind them, the first massive waves began to form on the lake's surface. The prophecy had spoken of 2 peoples joining to face a great threat. Now, after 1,000 years, it was time to prove if the prophecy was right. Race against time. Thunder cracked overhead as Jake and Zara's vehicle approached the underwater cave near Milwaukee. 3 more Aquari vehicles quickly joined them, Zara's friends. Above the water, 2 boats carrying Jake's scientist friends followed their position. First piece of the ancient weather network should be here, Zara said, checking the crystal's map. The cave entrance was blocked by fallen rocks, but that wasn't their biggest problem. Strange electrical currents now ran through the water, making their vehicle's systems flicker. Look, Jake pointed at something extraordinary. Where the lightning struck the lake, it didn't disappear. Instead, it formed glowing branches under the water, like upside-down lightning trees growing deeper and deeper. Suddenly, their vehicle's communication screen lit up. One of Jake's scientist friends, Dr. Sarah Chen, appeared. Jake, you won't believe what we're seeing up here. The storm is creating some kind of new energy pattern. It's like the lake is becoming one giant battery. Zara's eyes widened. That's why we need the weather network. The ancient ones knew this could happen. The lake's energy needs to flow properly. Or what? Jake asked, though he had a feeling he knew the answer. Or it explodes, came a new voice. A young male Aquari named Kex swam up to their vehicle. His skin patterns glowed with bright green technology markings. He was their best tech expert. The lake will literally explode from energy overload. The crystal pulsed urgently, projecting a new image. It showed them what the first piece of technology looked like, a pyramid-shaped device about the size of a car. The crystal then projected something else. A countdown. 5 hours, 12 minutes remaining. No pressure, Jake muttered. He turned to Dr. Chen on the screen. Sarah, we need your team to watch those energy patterns. Tell us if they get close to our position. Kex pressed his hand against the cave's blocked entrance. His tech markings glowed brighter, connecting with ancient symbols they hadn't noticed before. There's another way in, he announced. A maintenance tunnel. But he hesitated. It needs both human and Aquari to open it. Jake swam out of their vehicle, the crystal's power somehow letting him breathe underwater now. He placed his hand next to Kex on the cave wall. The ancient symbols lit up, spreading out like a web of light. A hidden doorway ground open, revealing the narrow tunnel. "That's not creepy at all," Jake said, looking into the dark passage. Their group split up. Jake, Zara, and Kex would go through the tunnel. The others would try to clear the main entrance as a backup escape route. Just before they entered, Dr. Chen's voice crackled through their comms. "Energy surge incoming. One of those lightning trees is growing toward you." They dove into the tunnel just as massive electrical currents shot past the entrance. Inside, bioluminescent algae activated as they passed, lighting their way. The tunnel walls were covered in ancient writing, a mix of human and Aquari languages. "These tunnels," Kex said, scanning the walls with his tech, "they're like a giant computer. The whole lake is connected by them." They swam deeper, following the crystal's guidance. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber. In the center, half buried in sand, was the pyramid device. But they weren't alone. "Well," said King Nixon, stepping out of the shadows with 4 guards, "I had a feeling you'd find this place." "Father," Zora gasped. "How did you?" "No," Nixon smiled. "Because I've been here before. 20 years ago, I found this chamber, and I learned why we must never activate the weather network again." The crystal suddenly projected a new memory, not from ancient times, but from 20 years ago. Young Nixon, watching in horror as a test of the weather network went wrong. The power had been too much, too dangerous. "The barrier is safer," Nixon insisted. "Yes, it will change the lake's ecosystem, but better that than risking everything." Just then, the entire cave shook. Dr. Chen's voice came through, panicked. "The energy levels are off the charts. The lightning trees are everywhere." The crystal floated between Jake and Nixon, growing brighter. It showed them both possibilities: the barrier's slow death of the lake versus the risk of the weather network. But then it showed something new. A third option. "The network doesn't control the weather," Jake realized, reading the ancient writings. "It channels it. Like a pressure valve for the lake's natural energy." Kex's tech markings pulsed as he connected to the pyramid. "He's right. We've been thinking about it wrong. We don't need to control the storm. We need to help the lake balance itself." Another violent shake. Parts of the ceiling began to fall. They had to make a choice. Now. King Nixon looked at the crystal's projections, his crown shifting through colors rapidly. Finally, it settled on a deep gold, the color of hope. "Show me," he commanded. "Show me how to save both our peoples." The crystal's light engulfed them, all as more lightning trees grew outside the cave. They had the first piece of the network, but they had less than 4 hours to find the others and uncover the true secret of Lake Michigan's power. And somewhere above them, the storm of the millennium was just beginning to show its full strength. The final choice. The underwater tunnels had become a maze of lightning trees. Each electrical branch grew like glowing roots through the water, forcing Jake, Zara, King Nixon, and their team to navigate carefully between them. They had found 3 pieces of the ancient weather network. The crystal now combined them into a hovering triangle formation, each pyramid device pulsing with synchronized energy. But the 4th piece remained hidden, and the storm above had become something impossible. "Jake," Dr. Chen's voice crackled through their comms. "The lake, it's starting to spiral, like a giant whirlpool, but it's pulling storm clouds into it." Through their vehicle's view screen, they saw it. The center of Lake Michigan had become a massive vortex, mixing water and sky. Lightning struck in perfect circles around it, and the lightning trees underwater grew toward the center like spokes on a wheel. 3 hours until the barrier activates, Kex reported, his tech markings flickering with interference. "But that vortex will tear apart both our cities before then." The crystal suddenly pulled from Jake's neck, growing larger. It projected a new vision, but this one was different. Instead of showing the past, it showed thousands of possible futures. In each one, the lake changed in different ways. "It's not just weather," Zara realized, watching the projections. "The lake is evolving. King Nixon's coral crown shifted to a deep purple of understanding. Of course, the ancient texts spoke of the Great Change. We thought it meant destruction, but he touched one of the pyramid devices, and ancient symbols lit up across its surface. The weather network isn't just technology, he continued. It's a key to help the lake transform safely. But if we don't find the last piece, a massive energy surge rocked their vehicles. Two of the lightning trees crossed paths nearby, creating an explosion of light and force. Warning alarms blared as their systems started failing. The last piece, Jake said, looking at the crystal's map. It's in the center of the vortex, isn't it? The crystal pulsed once in confirmation. Zara checked their vehicle's readings. The energy there is too strong. No vehicle can survive it. No vehicle, Kex agreed, his tech markings suddenly glowing brighter. But maybe something else can. He pressed his hands against their vehicle's controls, and his tech markings began spreading across the surface like growing vines. The ancient ones left us more than just the network, he explained. They left us the power to evolve too. His markings had now covered the entire vehicle, transforming it. The metal and crystal seemed to come alive, becoming almost organic. Biotech fusion, King Nixon breathed. The lost art. Their vehicle had changed into something new. Part machine, part living creature. It pulsed with bioluminescence, and new tendril-like extensions moved like sea creatures. It can survive the vortex now, Kex said, sweating from the effort. But it needs both human and aquari energy to power it. Just like the network. Jake looked at Zora. Without words, they both knew what they had to do. Wait, King Nixon called as they prepared to pilot the transformed vehicle. The prophecy had one more part. He touched his crown, and it dissolved into points of light that flowed into the crystal. When the lake changes, we must all be ready to change with it. The crystal absorbed the crown's energy and split into two identical crystals, one for Jake, one for Zara. As they put them on, their bodies began to glow. The transformation goes both ways, Nixon explained. Zara can now breathe air. Jake can breathe water. Perfect balance. They entered the transformed vehicle. Through its new organic viewport, they could see the vortex growing stronger. The lightning trees all around them pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. 2 hours left, Kex reminded them. Get to the center, find the last piece, and activate the network. The lake will do the rest. As Jake and Zara piloted toward the vortex, the two crystals hummed in harmony. Behind them, King Nixon and the others began positioning the 3 pyramid devices they had found. You know what's crazy? Jake said as they approached the swirling center. A week ago, my biggest worry was making sure kids didn't run by the pool. Zara laughed, the sound musical even in the face of danger. And I just wanted to watch a sunset. Their transformed vehicle entered the outer edge of the vortex. Energy coursed around them like liquid lightning. Through the chaos, they saw something at the center, a dark shape that called to them. The 4th piece waited below, but reaching it would require skills from both their worlds, trust in each other, and a willingness to become something entirely new. The lake's heart. The vortex was like nothing they could have imagined. Their bio-transformed vehicle spun through layers of water that glowed with strange colors. Lightning trees twisted around them like glowing tentacles, but instead of attacking, they seemed to be creating a path. Look, Zora pointed through their organic viewport. The water ahead was completely clear, no lightning, no chaos. At the center of the storm was a perfect sphere of calm. Their vehicle's new living sensors pulsed with readings. It's like a heartbeat, Jake said, watching the patterns. The whole lake is beating like a heart. As they entered the calm sphere, they saw it, the 4th piece of the weather network. But it wasn't a pyramid like the others. It was a perfect cube that seemed to be made of living crystal, floating in the center of the sphere. And around it are those memories, Zara whispered. Floating images surrounded the cube like bubbles, each showing a different moment in time. They saw the first HFY ships arriving on Earth. They saw ancient humans helping them build their cities. They saw the great storm that separated their peoples. But most surprisingly, they saw themselves. Jake saving Zara that first day at the beach. The lake's been watching, Jake realized. It's been waiting for our peoples to come together again. Suddenly, all their communications came alive at once. 1 hour until barrier activation. Kex. The vortex is reaching critical mass. Dr. Chen. The other pieces are responding to something. King Nixon. The cube began to pulse with intense light. The two crystals around Jake and Zara's necks pulled them forward, out of their vehicle. But instead of being torn apart by the vortex's power, they found they could move through it easily. As they swam closer to the cube, their bodies began to change. Jake's skin developed faint patterns like Zara's, glowing softly. Zara's fins became more translucent, taking on a human-like quality. They were becoming something in between their two species. The cube spoke to their minds. The great change is not just for the lake. It is for all. Images flashed around them faster now. They saw possible futures, cities where humans and HFY lived together, new technologies that combine both their sciences, children who could live in both worlds. Place your hands on the cube, the voice instructed. Complete the circle of change. But as they reached for it, dark energy suddenly erupted from the lake floor. The ancient barrier technology had started activating early. No, King Nixon's voice came through. The barrier's AI thinks it's protecting us. It's fighting the network. Dark energy tentacles, like inverse lightning trees, began wrapping around everything. Their biovehicle screeched in pain as one grabbed it. The barrier was trying to seal away the HFY city permanently. Jake looked at Zara. In that moment, they both knew what they had to do. Together, they said, and swam straight for the cube. The dark energy tried to separate them, but their crystals created a shield of light. They reached the cube just as the barrier's power reached their position. The moment their hands touched the crystal cube, everything changed. Energy exploded outward from their position, not destroying, but transforming. The lightning trees and dark energy tentacles merged, creating a new network of light throughout the lake. Their crystals melted into their skin, becoming part of them. The cube split open, revealing its true form, a three-dimensional map of a new kind of city, one that existed in both water and air, where both peoples could live together. Above them, the storm began to change. The violent clouds transformed into a spectacular light show. The vortex didn't disappear. Instead, it stabilized, becoming a permanent energy exchange between air and water. Their bodies continued changing, settling into a new form that was neither fully human nor fully HFY. They could now survive perfectly in both worlds. Through their new connection to the lake, they felt everything. Fish swimming, boats moving, the currents flowing. The lake was alive in a way neither of their peoples had understood before. It's done. King Nixon's voice came through, filled with awe. The barrier program has been completely rewritten. It's not sealing us away. It's creating bridges between our worlds. Dr. Chen's excited voice followed. The storm's energy, it's forming into permanent channels, like a circulatory system for the entire lake. Their biovehicle, now healed, moved to pick them up. As they headed back to the others, Jake and Zara looked at each other with their new eyes that could see perfectly in both air and water. You know what this means? Zara asked, smiling. Yeah, Jake replied, watching the lake's new energy networks glowing around them like auroras. Now you can watch all the sunsets you want. But they both knew it meant much more than that. The lake's transformation was just the beginning. Their people's greatest adventure was about to start. 1 year later, the sunset over Lake Michigan looked different now. The stabilized vortex at its center created constant auroras that danced across the water, mixing with the orange and purple sky. On the newly constructed observation deck, half underwater and half in air, Jake and Zara watched both worlds come alive with evening light. Their bodies, now permanently changed into what people called the bridge form, glowed softly with patterns that matched the lake's energy flows. Around them, humans and Aquari moved freely between water and air sections of the deck, thanks to the new adaptation chambers that granted temporary crossing abilities. "Hard to believe it's been a year since you were drowning right over there," Jake said, pointing to the spot where their story began. Zara laughed, her voice carrying both human speech and Aquari musical tones. "Hard to believe you were just a lifeguard. Now look at you. Ambassador of Interspecies Technologies." The observation deck was just one small part of what they now called Unity City. Through the clear walls, they could see the results of their people's collaboration. Floating gardens drifted by, tended by joint teams of human and Aquari botanists. The plants were new hybrids that could clean the lake's water while providing food for both species. Some even glowed with bioluminescence, creating moving constellations underwater. Transport pods, evolved versions of their biotransformed vehicle, carried people between surface cities and underwater communities. Each pod was partially alive, responding to its passengers' needs and helping maintain the lake's new energy system. Near the shore, the first class of Jewel World children played in specially designed areas. Some were human kids learning to use temporary gills. Others were aquarium ones practicing walking on land. A few, born to bridge-form parents like Jake and Zara would become, could naturally switch between both environments. Ambassador Chen's report came in today, Zara said, pulling up a holographic display from her crystalline wrist device. The lake's energy network has spread to the other Great Lakes. The transformation is spreading naturally. Just then, King Nixon surfaced nearby, his new crown made from living strands of both lightning tree energy and barrier crystal. "The council meeting is about to start," he announced. "They're voting on the expansion project." The expansion project was their biggest plan yet, creating similar bridge cities in oceans around the world, helping other aquatic species reveal themselves to humanity. The original prophecy had been right, but it was just the beginning. Kex swam up through the deck's water section, his tech markings now far more advanced. "You two need to see this first," he said excitedly. "The lake showed us something new." They followed him to the memory chamber, where the fourth cube piece still floated, surrounded by its historical bubbles. But now new images appeared, possible futures even more amazing than they'd imagined. Other species, Jake breathed, watching the bubbles. Not just underwater ones. The lake's transformation. It's like a key. The bubbles showed glimpses, lights in the sky, movements in deep forests, shapes in mountain mists. Earth had more hidden peoples than anyone had guessed, and the successful unity of humans and Aquari had started a chain reaction. Suddenly, the cube pulsed with familiar energy, the original crystals that had changed Jake and Zara, now part of their biology, resonated in response. A new prophecy formed in the water around them. First the waters, then the skies. Earth's children all shall harmonize. What started with a rescue brave leads all peoples from hiding's cave. "Well," Zara said, taking Jake's hand as they watched more future possibilities appear. "Looks like saving a drowning alien was just the beginning." The observation deck filled with both species as the council meeting time approached. Through the clear walls, they could see the lake's new energy network pulsing with life. Lightning trees had become permanent power channels. The barrier technology had evolved into connection points between worlds. In the distance, the sunset painted everything in gold, while the aurora from the vortex added waves of blue and green. Above and below the waterline, lights began coming on in both human and Aquari homes. Children's laughter, both verbal and musical, echoed through the halls. Jake looked at it all. The city, the lake, the combined peoples, and most importantly, Zara beside him. "You know what the best part is?" he asked. "What?" "I still get to be a lifeguard," he grinned. just for the whole planet now. The final prophecy bubble showed their future child, a perfect bridge between worlds, teaching others how to swim between water and sky. The rescue of one person had led to the rescue of entire civilizations. As they headed to the council meeting, the lake pulsed with contentment. Earth's first successfully merged peoples had proven what was possible. Now, as more hidden species prepared to emerge, the real adventure was just beginning. The sun set on another day in Unity City, its light reflecting off structures above and below the waves. In the very spot where Jake had first dove in to save Zora, a memorial crystal glowed, where two worlds became one, and showed all worlds what could be. The lake had been right all along. They just needed the courage to take the first dive into the unknown.